Good afternoon and welcome to Late Coffee with COG. Thank you very much for joining us today on Zoom. Before we get into the session, we have a fantastic lineup today, but I want to start by introducing you, our audience. First of all, there's over 100 people on this call today that registered. So we know that you could choose to be other places and do other things, and we're so glad that you could join us for this exciting panel today. So about you. Your municipal leaders, practitioners, builders of community, entrepreneurs, and action-oriented people. You make your work taking on hard topics, you accept the little wins, but you go for the big ones too. And you're located all across the region and beyond. My name is Vanessa Farr, and I'm Senior Planner with the Greater Portland Council of Governments, and I'm honored to be today's MC of this event. This is my first hosting experience with Late Coffee with COG, and our first of the 2022 year. So we've asked this dynamic group of participants to gather here, recognizing and applauding their leadership successes, tackling hard topics, and creating programs that break down silos and barriers to development. So there's a couple of common threads across their work, and I think you're going to hear those today. Bold leadership, risk-taking, being willing to try things differently, knowing that to go it the same way is only going to result in more of the same, and mentorship and humility. And I think on this point, I would like to say that these are individuals who are very willing to share what it is that they know, but also willing to ask about the things that they don't know. So for today, we hope that this is a conversation starter, and that if there are ideas you hear today that you're interested in exploring in your own communities, we're here to help you scale those communities to your needs. So we'll be sending out copies of a link to this webinar, as well as PowerPoints from our presenters. So the format for today. So we're going to hear from the three panelists, starting with Mayor Mike Foley of Westbrook, followed by Mayor Jason Levesque of Auburn, and then Jim Tischler from the state of Maine. So after that, we'll move into a question and answer period, and you'll be able to post your comments into the chat, and we'll hope for a really robust conversation with you. So with that, let's get started. So our first speaker today is Mayor Mike Foley. Mike Foley is the mayor of the city of Westbrook. He has nearly 2 decades of public service, having previously served on the city council and school committee. As a lifelong resident of Westbrook, he takes great pride in the success and growth the city has seen in recent years. And he has worked hard to make Westbrook a desirable place to live, work, and play. Outside of his service to the city, he works part-time as an emergency communications officer, and his family owns a couple of businesses. So with that, we welcome you, Mayor Mike.
Thank you so much for that welcome, Vanessa. Let me go ahead and get my screen shared here with everyone. And before I get into the meat of my presentation, I just want to thank GPCOG, for the great work that they do, and Vanessa for getting us together to share some of the great successes that are happening in Maine and happening in our region as well, and outside of our region. As Vanessa said, I've been serving the city of Westbrook for nearly 2 decades. I previously served 17 years on the city council. Before that, I served as a student representative on the school committee in Westbrook. And so one of the things we'll talk a little bit about today is schools. I have an understanding of both municipal and governing of our schools. And so it's really exciting to be able to share some of the work that we've done in Westbrook. When I became the mayor of the city of Westbrook, one of the things that was important to me was to help focus on growth in the heart of our community. Westbrook had a downtown that had been working to revitalize for a number of years. And one of the aspects that we were missing from our downtown was residential components. And the goal by adding those residential components was to go from being an 8 to 12 hour downtown to a potentially 12 to 20 hour downtown, where there's much more activity and much more people walking around the downtown, in addition to the neighborhoods surrounding the downtown and the folks that drive to the downtown as well. So when I became the mayor, one of the first things we undertook was a focus on growth in the heart of our community. And we established some new downtown zoning district standards. And so I'll focus on that for a little bit and then tell you about some of the other great successes we're having from development here in the city of Westbrook. But specifically, these downtown overlay district, if you look on the map that I'm showing here on the screen, the red area was our original downtown zoning district, or now we call it the downtown district heart. And initially we had the zoning that I'm going to talk about today in that area. But as we continued to struggle to be able to find developments that happened exactly in that area, I thought it was important that we continued to look at the rest of our area in the core of our Main Street, which is established infrastructure that has on-street parking, public transit, access to parks, recreational opportunities, and try to expand our residential growth opportunities even further down Main Street. And we hope to even expand it further down Main Street outside of this blue area that we talked about. For those familiar with Westbrook, the red area is the core of our downtown, where businesses like CVS, Portland Pie, the Frog and Turtle, the bridge to cross the river and go over into near the Dana Wart Mill and the main health building. We are right in that area in the red section. But as you venture further down Main Street, you encounter Riverbank Park, which is one of the larger parcels that has the digits ending in 192 on it. And then even further down where we have the larger open area, it's our Cumberland Mills area, which is currently undergoing some infrastructure improvements and some intersections. And we thought it was important to try to capture in all the real estate from that point down to be able to have the opportunity for some new growth and development, specifically in the residential area, but also in the commercial area. So a real quick overview of these downtown standards. The overlay district requirements allowed for a density of 1 unit per 500 square feet in this district. Building height is negotiable, and there's no minimum lot size with our planning board. The parking requirements are 1 space per unit, unless a transportation management plan could be provided to demonstrate reduced needs. Things of, we're going to market to folks who utilize the bus or public transit, folks who utilize Uber and things like that, and then folks who may use bicycles. So in that case, you might be able to get a development where you might have 20 units, but you only need to provide parking for 10 units or something of that nature. So there's the opportunity for that to happen in this area. And then also residential units are prohibited from first level or street level to encourage the use of commercial spaces to create thriving downtown and to activate more area outside of the heart and core of our downtown. And then architectural standards are utilized to ensure the quality and enhance the streetscape on Main Street. And so we've begun to be very successful with this initiative. It's about a little over about 2 years old, actually, these standards that the city council adopted. And then immediately once they were adopted, developers went to work on potential projects. So now this is a map that shows that downtown overlay district that I talked about, and you'll see some of the dots that include some of the residential projects that I'm going to talk about today. As you can see, there's a few residential projects outside of the downtown district that are near and close proximity to our downtown, and then there's some dots of projects that are actually located in this new zoning that we talked about. And the bigger the dot, the bigger the potential amount of units in this property. So one of the cool projects that we have coming is 22 Cumberland Street. And this project is going to be in the Cumberland Mills area, and it's going to be called Railway Commons, and it's going to encompass 10 dwelling units, 4 commercial units, 12 parking spaces, and have a 3,900 square foot footprint and be 3 stories tall. One of the things that some of the developers who work towards, the cost goes up dramatically when you get over 4 stories, because there's a requirement for an elevator. So some of the developments have kept to the 3 stories, but we have some that are going over that. And this property was a great reuse of a property. For anyone who didn't know, in Westbrook, we had a small shoe repair shop called Paul's Shoe Repair that was in kind of like a mobile home of some sort along a railway. And what's great is Pan Am Railways, or their successor, began to unload some of their rail lines. And so this developer purchased that rail line, which allowed them to be able to incorporate this development and begin to increase density in this area using the rail line. And I'll talk about another project that is utilizing some old rail lines. But this is a really cool development that has the storefronts that you can see that are going to be right on Cumberland Street, which is in the Cumberland Mills Circle. It kind of interconnects with Main Street. This is going to be a beautiful space. And this developer, it's actually a Wilson and Sons, is a developer in the community under the leadership of Chris Wilson. They did one of our other projects in the community, which is actually done and in use today. So this is a really cool project that's coming, and it's giving us 10 additional dwelling units that we didn't have in these areas. The next project is really exciting. This is Seabee Street. And so this project encompassed the purchase of an old rail line as well. And here we're going to have a proposed residential project. The developer is yet to be announced, but the city council has actually supported this zone change, because initially the railway properties were not included in our housing overlay area because we thought the railway would continue to use it. So we later amended the zoning to allow the railways to be included, and therefore it included this much larger parcel that's on Main Street, interconnected with Seabee Street, and actually abutting the rail line, the continued active rail line that actually comes all the way from Portland through Rock Row and through downtown Westbrook that goes into Gorham and Wyndham. I believe it's the Mountain Division rail line. But this project is cool. It's approximately 3.2 acres. The initial project we're seeing projected to have 120 dwelling units. These are going to be mixed potentially with senior housing as well as micro units. With construction costs going the way that they are, developers are looking at micro units as a way to be able to get affordable housing into the market and to be able to make the projects cost effective. So again, this land was previously actually Sappy land and railroad land. Sappy has slowly begun to divest themselves of some of the excess land that they have here in the city of Westbrook as their operations kind of become more compact to the mill area. So we hope to see them do that with other lands in the future for other future development, both residential and commercial. But this is a completely vacant parcel. It's a completely clean slate, abutting an existing neighborhood and Main Street. So it's going to have significant impact for the community, and it's going to have some partnerships to result in some affordable housing for both individuals as well as some senior housing. The next project, this project is 630 Main Street. This project is actually under construction today. And this project took over a dilapidated house that had been in disrepair for a number of years. And this project is done by a developer in the community, Ryan Lee. He's developed some other projects in the community, very well done projects. It's going to encompass 12 dwelling units and 4 commercial spaces on that first floor with 18 parking spaces, and it encompasses a 4,000 square foot footprint. And this one will be 4.5 stories. As the building sits today, you can see the elevator shaft as they're awaiting carpenters to begin this project. And this project is in very close proximity to our Riverbank Park and some other, food businesses. And so it's going to be great to have these people walking around in this area, visiting these food businesses and having access to recreational opportunities and trails that go all the way to our downtown core or downtown heart. This next project, 660 Main Street, is actually active. It's been featured in a recent article in the American Journal, which is Portland Press Herald affiliate that covers Westbrook. This project has 6 residential units. It's 3.5 stories with 2 commercial units on the first floor, 8 parking spaces, and it's currently fully occupied. The rental units rented in absolute no time, and the commercial units rented very quickly as well. The front main space includes a barber shop that was previously located in the community in a less accessible place. So it's a great use for turnover on-street parking. People, they come in for a half hour to an hour and visit the barber shop. And then the back space, which has the little awning in the back, is actually a floral shop. And it's a small little space where it's perfect for a single owner floral shop. It's a pedalage floral, and the barbershop is Mills Barbershop. Pedalage is primarily focused on weddings in advance and was mostly on-site flower stuff, and now has this shop to be able to be in downtown in close proximity within walking distance of all the various things. So this is a very successful project. And again, this replaced a dilapidated residential property that was in much need of repair. And we hope to see projects like this one and the last one duplicated in other parts of our Main Street. Another very exciting project that kind of isn't a result of this new zoning, but is part of the zoning we have downstairs, is Vertical Way. I'm sure many of you have heard about the Vertical Harvest project that's coming to the city of Westbrook, and this is very exciting for many reasons. One, it's bringing commercial or indoor greenhouse into the downtown that's going to generate a significant amount of produce. The company Vertical Harvest already has a contract with Native Maine Produce, Sodexo, which provides food services for the University of Southern Maine, and they also are going to be able to provide produce to many local area businesses as well. And so this is going to include a parking garage and residential project. It's going to have up to 60 dwelling units. Also on the street area from this picture that we're showing, there's going to be a 7,000 square foot commercial unit, which is first level. We hope to occupy that with a provision store of some sort, or divide it into other provisions, maybe a small grocery store, or different businesses that could combined be a place to get provisions. There'll be 370 space public parking garage and a 3,900 square foot footprint, encompassing 6 stories. And this space is a current municipally owned parking garage. It has approximately 100 or so parking spaces, and very difficult to manage in the winter with snow removal and things of that nature. But this is going to be great to have this parking garage, because once this parking garage is built, it will give us the opportunity to do much more redevelopment in the heart of our downtown. The city has a number of other municipally owned parking spaces or parking lots in the downtown that will now become available for redevelopment once this parking garage is placed, so we can replace all that parking and have the additional parking. We will need to have a better parking management plan in the future, which may potentially include more parking enforcement, more timed parking, maybe meters of some sort in the core of this downtown to encourage people to park for free in the parking garage. And working with the developer here, the city has divested itself of the maintenance responsibilities as part of the long-term lease agreement for the land and things of that nature. So this has been a tremendous partnership for the community, and it's going to be amazing. We hope to break ground on this project early this winter, but as with delays and everything surrounding COVID and workforce shortage and construction pricing, we've seen some of those delays as everyone else has had. But we're very excited to have that project. The project is also slated to potentially have solar panels on the roof, so it'll be very environmental friendly. And then as part of development in Westbrook, developments are required to provide a recreational opportunity or participate in a fee in lieu of, and there'll be a courtyard in like the top horseshoe area of this development that will encompass for the residents there of that property. So this is very exciting, and I'm very excited about this. And when I became mayor, a project like this is something that we began working on to begin right away, because there's a lot of opportunity with businesses and stuff in the area that this project can help create foot traffic and turn that downtown into the 18 to 20 hour downtown that we're looking for. This other development here, 21 Sacco, it's an adjacent development to our city center district. This is in concept form right now, working through our planning board, some workshops thus far. But what's really cool about this is there are 29 dwelling units, 74 parking spaces, and 14,000 square foot commercial first floor, resulting in 4 stories. And you can see actually what is there now. So there's a building that's not utilizing its full site, and so it'll be great to have that there and have that residential opportunity. And this area is a stone's throw and steps away from our downtown. And in addition to this project, this intersection here is undergoing reconstruction by the Maine Department of Transportation, and essentially the extension of William Clark Drive. As you know, it's a 4-lane roadway. This intersection was not funded when that project was done. So we're looking forward to the continuation of the beautiful William Clark Drive going through this intersection as well, along with this new development that we hope to have in the future. So in addition to this, downtown area development, Westbrook has a ton of residential projects that we've recently approved in 2021. In 2021, we added 133 units. As you can see, Greenfield Place off New Gorham Road, 26 units there. It's a single family condo association. And that was all approved, originally submitted in July of 2020 and approved in February 2021. 511 Bridge Street, 9 units. This is multifamily, originally submitted in November of 2020, approved in March. And these are all record time approvals that you don't see in some other communities or nearby communities such as Portland. Planning board processes take much longer, and that's no dig on them, but they definitely have a lengthier process that developers like the process we have here in Westbrook. 98 East Bridge Street, Dovetail Lane, it's 3 units multifamily. 364 Spring Street by Flagship Construction in a portion of the Twin Falls Golf Course, the former Twin Falls Golf Course. This is 22 units, multi and duplexes. Again, both these were submitted in November 2020, approved in May of 2021. We've got the Vertical Harvest project that I talked about. That's going to have additional units. We have 820 Main Street internal renovation. This is a building that was once commercial office on these floors. On the first floor, there's a hair salon and a coffee shop. They're adding residential units, and that's 6 units that are going to be right in the core of our downtown. The 21 Sacco Street, which I mentioned just a moment ago, the 22 Cumberland Street, the 10 units, which I mentioned. We're looking at a development, Deer Hill Circle, which is on an old paper street with 16 units, and then 313 4th Street adding 2 units for a total of 133 units in 2021. And then forecasting 2022, we have 476 units that are in permitting. And this is great numbers as we work to help address the housing shortage and address housing affordability in the region. The housing affordability is simply a supply and demand issue. And in that economic formula, we need to increase the supply, and we need to do it collectively as a region. And we're playing our part here in Westbrook. We have Brooks Edge Farm that's coming in with 118 units. These are duplexes. That was actually submitted in November, and that project was just recently approved, and we hope to see soon. River Meadow Golf Course, couple of golf courses unfortunately closed in the city of Westbrook, and they have been found to be great development opportunities. 28 units in their first phase of single family. River Meadow, we're working with Westbrook Housing Authority to have 60 units. Twin Falls, which is on Spring Street, across from the Blue Spruce Farm development that people may have heard about in years past, with 59 units, single family. The cottages at Berkshire, which are 95 units, duplexes and some single family homes. Methodist Road condos, 10 units. Duplexes, Strawwater Apartments with Westbrook Housing Authority. We're using an old, a more an ice skating rink. It's an old-fashioned ice skating rink, pour ice over the lawn. We're working to make that available for senior housing in close proximity to recreational opportunities and grocery store. That's 55 units that's in play. And Dog Days LLC, which is 547 Sacco Street, looking to put 51 units. And that's 476 units that are actually just in permitting here in the city of Westbrook. And the great thing is there's even more to come. You don't see on this list Rock Row. Rock Row is forecasting to have 700 residential units that we anticipate they'll be making application this year for 200 to 300 of those units. And those will be all market rate housing. That will be help to have some housing in the Rock Row area in close proximity to the turnpike and all the retail things there. And I think one of the burning questions that people are asking about all this development in Westbrook, what does this do to your schools? The narrative of all this development destroying our schools, overcrowding our schools, it's constant. It's constant in Westbrook, and it's constant in communities all over this region. And it is simply not true, and the facts do not support it. In fact, in Westbrook alone, and I'll show you the data, the source of my data is the US Census, in addition to the main ED 279, which is the funding formula for schools, and they use enrollment data. As you can see here in Westbrook, we've grown from a population of 16,142 people in the year 2000 to 20,400 people in the year 2020, for a 24% increase in population. And then units, we've gone from 7,089 units in the year 2000 to 9,083 units. And the unit number for Westbrook is accurate because I have building permit data. But the two, I'm going to tell you about two other communities in a moment that bring us, that are estimates, but because that data is not available from the 2020 census yet, but we're showing a 25% increase in available units. And if you look at the school enrollments, they've gone from 2,698 students in the year 2000 to 2,347 units. Students enrolled in school, which is a 14% reduction. And if I went even further back to 1990 and the 1980s, you would see exponential decline in enrollments here in the city of Westbrook. So we need to work with our elected officials in schools and school committees to let them know that this narrative of all this development impacting our schools is simply not true. In fact, it's impacting our schools in a positive way, because we can now spread the cost of schools over more people and more property taxpayers here in the community. And so, as I'll say about Westbrook, we've coined the phrase as Maine's fastest growing city. The census data reports that, and economically, we have so much economic activity that we can use that phrase as Maine's fastest growing city. But then we're neck and neck in the US Census with our friends in Scarborough, who we can consider Maine's fastest growing town. And the data is very similar. They went from 16,970 in population in 2000 to 22,135, which is a 27% growth in population, potential 26% growth in residential units, which again, these are estimates. I forecasted a 10% growth over 2010. I think I may be conservative on that with the development at the Downs. And the Downs and the town of Scarborough have been showing a lot of data which show they're not bringing students into the school. And you can see Scarborough is showing a similar data point of a 12% reduction in students. People are just not having the same family sizes as they were 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And something would have to change significantly for that trend to go in a different direction. And then lastly, since we'll be hearing from our friend, Mayor Levesque from Auburn is very similar. They've shown an 8% growth in population, a 14% growth in the amount of available units, and a 9% reduction in student enrollments. So all this development is having a positive impact on our communities, making more housing, making affordable housing, and not having an adverse effect on other areas of the community, such as our schools. And in Westbrook specifically, we closed the school committee chose to close a school a number of years ago, and then did expansions of 2 other schools. So from a net perspective, we have more classrooms than we did 20 years ago, and we have continued to have less students. I won't get into the conversation of how the budgets continue to grow at an exponential factor, but maybe Jason might make a joke about that. But I'll last leave you with a picture of our 2022 ice disc here in the city of Westbrook. Mayor Levesque says that I make these every year to help put Westbrook on the map, but unfortunately I don't. Mother Nature has gifted us with this, and it seems like conditions present itself that we may have this year after year. But all this growth and development in our downtown is great because we have an attractive place to come. And when we have things like the ice disc or gatherings such as downtown concerts, our development is built to be able to, our downtown is built to be able to support people to come and visit and visit all the amazing restaurants, cafes, pizza places, and many great things that we have to offer in our downtown. I think we're going to take questions at the end of all of our speakers. So I will turn it back over to Vanessa. Thank you.
I'm so glad that all 3 of these guys are here today. They have such good senses of humor, and I think that's going to come out when we get to the chat later. All right, Jim Tischler serves as the development director for the State of Michigan Land Bank Authority. In his role, he leads the agency's land, project development, and redevelopment operations, coordinates state-sponsored development, redevelopment projects, and consults regional and local development land bank entities in their projects. In addition, he is a visiting fellow at the University of Windsor Law Center for Cities, working with students on planning law topics and faculty with applied research and local community projects. He has more than 30 years of experience in the fields of urban planning, real estate, community economic development and redevelopment, working for public organizations and consulting with private sector firms. Jim holds a Master's of Urban Planning degree from Wayne State University and a graduate certificate from the University of Oklahoma Economic Development Institute. His major certifications include Fellow of the American Institute of Certified Planners, Michigan Professional Community Planner, and International Status Member in the Canadian Institute of Planners. So with that, welcome, Jim.
So the initiative that we've been running for about 10 years is called My Place. It's a relationship between state government and local community government. It's built on a framework of encouraging local units to get development ready or redevelopment ready based on their location, and that the state has a responsibility to assist and help structure local units in their ability to become development ready, not just in their plans, but also in their policies and also in their programs for development review. So what you're seeing here is the structure of this initiative that we built. We started early. We started with building a placemaking curriculum. And then based upon that structure, engaging a large measure of teaching and training with local partners out across the field for a number of years. From that point, implementation began, and only after those 3 key pieces were in place did the state develop policy to support local units in development planning. And that's the first, I think, key taking that perhaps locals in your state might take from here, which is that it's a relationship, that local units have the home rule authority to plan and regulate, but that a basic platform needs to be established for promoting the good development planning of the type you've already heard and you'll hear again in the Mayor of Auburn's presentation. And that's what My Place was intended to do. So let me advance the slide here. It will advance. There we go. There we go. So this curriculum, we started to build this about 10 years ago. The My Place initiative has been around for about that long time. This curriculum is a little different than what might be the statutory presentation of how local units may need to develop their conference plans and develop zoning regulations. Why? Because that is what the law says you do. What the law doesn't probably tell you to do is actually what are the best methods and tools and approaches to do that. And again, you heard earlier, and you're going to hear again, a place-based focus, which has intensity, density of development, is the best social, economic, ecological, and physiological return. That's what all the research shows. And so this curriculum that we constructed has 6 modules. You see those modules going up the ladder in this slide here, where the first module is the basics of people, places, and placemaking. The second module is, what did the numbers say? What is it all about? Showing across all these various categories of research and practice, still going to this day, that place-based planning and ethic to planning and zoning has the best returns across all those realms. The next module is, what are the components, the kit of parts? Again, you've heard a little bit already, and perhaps in your community, you're already practicing with that kit of parts, which is down to neighborhood scale with form elements and the connectivity requirements that are necessary there. Next module is, how does it actually come into being through a form planning, development, arrangement, alignment. The fifth module is, how does those happen? And it happens in communities and public with full engagement and transparency across everything. And then 6 is, what are the tools that actually make it happen? This structure, which probably is not too unfamiliar to y'all, when I say we, the state, I was involved in the quarterback role behind scenes in putting $2 million of state money into developing and executing and implementing this curriculum starting about 10 years ago. And to date, we've trained about 15,000 people, most of those being appointed officials, elected officials, citizens across communities in the state. And that's what that's done, is move the needle in understanding of what the good ethics are for good planning, good zoning. Now, we didn't do it ourselves. We did it as part of a group collaboration. The key collaborators are, again, these are entities that are similar in your state too. You have a good municipal association. You have university extension going on in Maine as well and such. We utilize those vehicles of structure to actually help implement this. And there's a council of all the state trade agencies here that are 100% into this, meaning the realtors, the bankers, in addition to the design professionals, and the manufacturers, all supporting this concept because they recognize that talent, place, and business are all combined. So how does the state in our neck of the woods work with local units? Well, we changed tact 10 years ago, meaning we went from a traditional approach, which was allocating or spreading evenly across all units of government on a per capita or per pupil or per dollar basis for dollar flow, which it still happens today in a number of places, I'm sure. But the research shows that has sporadic impact. It requires real champions like the mayors you're hearing today to actually make things happen. But in communities, especially rural communities where there's not a lot of capacity, that might be a little hard to accomplish. And so that's where the sporadicity comes from. The alternative, which we decided here, was to shift and enter and engage an alignment, coordination strategy, and targeting strategy to stimulate private investment, then would leverage the benefits that impact. Once again, you've heard already a little bit of this from Mayor Foley. He's talked about the leveraging of impact from his projects. On the right-hand side of this slide, you're seeing the relevant agencies of state government in Michigan. I won't get into the alphabet soup today, but they're there, and you have the same in your state too. And what we recognized was that individually they have pots of money, federal money or state money that they use to invest in real estate or projects in communities on real estate. But collectively, it was north of $1.25 billion annually back in 2012. And it's grown, of course, now today, and that was before ARPA. So the thought process here is that if those agencies actually shift and align and become essentially a public sector REIT, a real estate investment trust, they can make good decisions, investments in projects which have the best return for the citizens of the state. However, local units have local control, home control, and that's appropriate. It needs to be preserved. By the way, I came out of local government here locally too, so I recognize that. So this idea of a interface, and we call it redevelopment ready communities, that's our development readiness model program, is that, meaning that we give communities the ability to continue their home rule and their individual decision-making authority to develop plans, policies, and programs, and we support them in that work. But they need to meet thresholds. They need to be evaluating those thresholds. And if they meet the minimum thresholds across 5 or 6 different categories, then they rise to a level where they are at top priority for state investments. And that's how the system works: preserving local authority, home rule, but also encouraging local units to become development ready and be able to handle and facilitate good development projects, which then the state's investments, if and as necessary as incentives, actually leverage and make benefit for everybody. What are those 6 areas that are in our redevelopment ready review program, certification program? No different than what you might expect. We focus on standards for community plans and the public outreach for those plans. Zoning regulations, which depend upon the community, it could be standard zoning, or in a growing number of communities, it's gone to a form or a zone form of forms-based zoning arrangement, which also has merit in the research and practice. Development review process. The intention and encouragement is for communities to move towards a more streamlined approach, and where and as appropriate, that they can move that even into a by right administrative review context. Recruitment and education, how they actually bring people, public, elected and appointed officials and citizens to understand and participate in the process. What used to be economic development is now been retitled community prosperity, because of the recognition that the prosperity is not more than just jobs and investment. It's jobs, investment, and it's social benefit, and it's ecological benefit. And as I'm aware, in your state, you've done a lot of work with climate response. That comes into a prosperity framework as well. And then finally, the last area of evaluation is, what are the sites? What are the areas that are targeted by that community or those communities actually to be ready to go for developers? So those projects that we heard Mayor Foley talk about probably would fit that structure within our certification review program. This is a busy slide. I'm not going to go through the details here. What you're seeing is the 3 major stages of how the state works with local units. First is we engage. In other words, this is not application and you wait for us to decide and we say you're in or you're not. No, that's not how it works. The state has an obligation to actually service and support local units. And so what we do is we have a field staff which actually is trained and structured and programmed and working in the communities to actually work them through the engagement process to get them ready. And then second stage is how they go through evaluation process, again, with involvement and support from state staffs and state agencies. And third comes certification, that if they meet those thresholds, that they actually are certified and they get the benefits of engagement with the state. And those benefits can be summarized in 5 to 6 different categories. And starting with the fact that the certification, just like the Good Housekeeping Seal, is in effect an ISO criteria standard that developers more and more in our state are looking to go to communities that are development or redevelopment ready. It's a third-party review process, which is even more advantageous. It reflects the ongoing partnership, not just come in and be approved, but ongoing for the state, because we prioritize certified communities for the community development and the transportation and the natural resources and on the other incentive funding tools, so that those investments have more return for their investment and the state's investment. We continue technical assistance across the board, and not just with certified communities, with communities that want to go through process and need assistance in basic elements or development or support for their comp plan or their zoning regulations rewrite or amendments. We provide funding support for that as well. And the technical assistance, which is advanced level, it comes with matched funding. In other words, we provide grants to help communities do certain projects, certain activities, planning and development design activities with their dollars. Last slide here. What's been happening? It's been 10 years. Well, you're looking at a map of the state. And what you can see here is that just about every city and village in Michigan is in the system. Took a little while to get started, but now they're in. The diamonds are the communities that are working through process at some level. Okay, more than 200. The stars, this map goes back, I think, to November of last year, are the ones that have actually reached certification, which is almost 60. And the one that's going through some basic assistance training with the state is the essential community too. And what are the numbers? Well, that's on the right side. If somebody might ask, going through all this, what is the benefit for a community? Well, what it does is it leverages investments from the state in those projects that the communities bring forward, which are good enough themselves, but may need to cover gap financing or gap element because they have extraordinary cost. Well, in that case, you're talking about investments, at least in economic development alone, of close to $1.1 billion over the last 10 years, which has leveraged more than $4 billion in investment. And what you don't see on this slide is that this same study has shown that these investments in these certified development-ready communities, when these investments happen, they actually raise the values in those neighborhoods by a factor of 20%, whether it's commercial or residential. And those values yield tax dollars, which yield benefit for those communities. So that's as fast as in some ways I can talk to you about how we here in Michigan work with our local units to encourage them and help them and maintain their ability to be development ready. So I'll turn the floor back to Vanessa, and you can share the screen back to Mayor Levesque.
Great, thank you, Jim. So next we're going to hear from Mayor Jason Levesque, first elected in 2017, then re-elected in 2019 and 2021. Mayor Jason J. Levesque is a fifth generation Auburn resident and a 1992 graduate of Edward Little High School. After attending college at West Virginia Wesleyan and conducting an 8-year tour in the US Army, Mayor Levesque realized that there was no place he would rather start a company and raise a family than in Auburn, Maine. Jason founded Argo Contact Centers in 2003, which became one of the largest employers in Androscoggin County, making the Inc. list of fastest growing companies in America for 3 consecutive years. And in 2015, Argo was recognized as the fastest growing company in the state of Maine and was a recipient of the LA Metro Chamber of Commerce Business of the Year Award. As Auburn's mayor, Jason realizes not only what a great city Auburn is, but also its great potential. Through the power and knowledge of its citizens and businesses and its proximity to southern Maine, the Rocky Coast, and the Western Mountains, Auburn is poised for an even greater growth in the years to come.
Well, again, I'm Mayor Jason Levesque from the city of Auburn. I'd like to thank you all here for coming. My presentation is going to be a little bit different, primarily because I'm fairly new at this. I started in government just 4 years ago. I was elected in 2017, took over in 2018 as mayor. And I did have one thing that I brought from, maybe more than one, but one big thing I brought from the private sector was that if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And that was the absolute truth in business. It was the absolute truth in the military. And it's something that's always stayed with me. But I also recognize that I know nothing. And when I came in as mayor, I absolutely believed that. And I still do. And I go through everything, especially zoning, comprehensive planning, strategic planning, with the recognition that I know nothing, which prompts me, it makes me ask many, many questions. But I don't think I'm alone. What's a zone? Said everyone in Maine that's not on this Zoom today. I think that is absolutely true because it's a complicated topic. It's an evolution that's lasted almost 100 years in this country that has a knowledge base that's owned by really a select few. And that knowledge has not permeated through the rest of society. At least I can speak as a pseudo developer on the side, a landowner, and someone who owns a home. So what we did in 2008 is we asked a lot of questions. We understood we knew nothing. We wanted to find out where we are and where we're going to go. One of the reasons I ran for mayor was because I realized that Auburn had an amazing set of assets. So this awakening happened, as I called it, in 2018. we started realizing that Auburn's proximity to Portland was a huge asset in the greater Portland marketplace. We had a significant growth of legacy employers from healthcare to manufacturing, low unemployment, around 3.5% at the time and creeping lower, increased housing costs due to lack of affordability. Started seeing that start to percolate to the top, artificial scarcity of land in single family homes due to that scarcity. And I will say this, or due to restrictive zoning rather, just as a point of reference, Auburn geographically is larger than the cities of Portland, Westbrook, Cape Elizabeth, and South Portland combined. So we have plenty of land mass, but the scarcity caused by restrictive zoning caused land prices and home prices to rise exorbitantly. Higher than state average population growth, which was good, but a significant decline in school-age population. We also noticed a rapidly growing rural population, and rural as in our surrounding towns, Minot, Poland, Turner, New Gloucester. In 20 years, we saw an 8% increase in population. They were seeing literally a 100% increase in population. And then coupled with a growing socioeconomic divide between neighborhoods, that was really bothersome. And when you put everything together, you realize that Auburn was at a pivotal inflection point, if you would, within our city's history, 150-year history. So we had to have a strategy. So we started working on that strategy. And really that strategy can be boiled down into around 5 to 6 salient points. Building pride through positivity, events, highlights, reasons for growth, crafting a strategic plan with broad participation and efficient process that guides our comp plan review. And also being honest with yourself and others about zoning, sprawl, and socioeconomic discrimination. Eliminate needless regulations, fees. Understand what return on investment truly means. And then housing affordability. I want to go back a little bit. Housing affordability versus affordable housing, and then versus attainable housing. Understanding that there's 3 different things. Then we had to seek knowledge and experience from outside of Maine. Mercatus Institute at George Mason was extremely helpful, came on site, really talked with us, municipal leaders around the country, and other developers from New York and out west, and really understanding what they're looking for in order to help guide our process. Put all together, our goal is success. Our strategic planning really focused on growth, quality, and investment, and that was our next step. In order to fully understand what the community wanted in a city, in the future Auburn, we brought in over 100 individuals, community members, business folks, staff, educators, and we looked at really what's important to them. Everybody recognized, and this was in 2019, capturing opportunity now, was critical. We recognized that we had a difficult time attracting and retaining young professionals and skilled workforce. We also knew that housing attainability was a word we wanted to use. It seemed market rate housing and affordable housing were 2 terms that only represented housing on opposite sides of the spectrum from each other. But attainable housing really helps everybody, regardless of income level or socioeconomic background, attain housing of their choice and what they can afford. Improve and increase the housing stock or reducing impediments to improvement and growth. And then also prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion in everything we do. So as we're going through this process, we have some key findings. And these are really specific to Auburn, but I will state that if we start looking at each individual community, and if you on this call start looking there, you're probably going to see a lot of similarities here. And as Mayor Foley from Westbrook stated, that declining school-age population is really a huge objection to any type of growth. Through smart cost of service analysis and looking at the data, having the data influence your knowledge, and then applying wisdom, you can actually make some really smart conclusions. We recognize in Auburn that we could handle 6,000 more people, no problem, without increasing our cost of services, when actually would help reduce our overall tax burden within the city. We had to underutilize existing resources, namely infrastructure, water, sewer, and especially roads, considering geographically we're so large. We had amazing amounts of restrictive road frontage requirements that we're now proposing be shrunk by a third and half, or even more so, in order to actually have more people on that existing infrastructure that has to be maintained. We also recognize a restrictive zoning shifts tax burden kind of from affluent neighborhoods to poor neighborhoods, further marginalizing working poor and immigrants. Let me restate that. We found in Auburn that people understood zoning and could, through the political process, influence where their backyards were zoned, thereby moving them from residential to conservation or agriculture, which has restrictive, basically no development potential, and hence artificially decreases their valuation and decreases their taxes. People in town, in our traditional downtown neighborhoods, did not have that ability. So using of zoning to influence individual neighborhoods' tax burden is actually, it destroys your community. It furthers that gap between wealth and non-wealth, and it further marginalizes communities that have historically been marginalized. Complicated ordinances, hard to understand. Again, I look back at Socrates. I know nothing. If I can't look at our ordinances and our zoning and understand them within a few minutes, or at least not feel like an idiot, then I've done my job. Poor perception of regulations, inspections, and fees. I heard from so many people that it just felt like the people of Auburn were being nickel and dimed to death. And really, how is this arbitrary fees? How are they justified? Do they make sense? What are they going to? Outdated parking ordinances. All things to all people. That's what I call the syndrome, if you would. We want walkable, we want parkable, we want busable. You can't have all three. Pick two. You want a walkable, busable city? Awesome, great. We're going to start building in parking lots. You want walkable and parkable? Fine, we're getting rid of the buses. Pick two and make them the two best amenities you can have as a city. And then we continue to see problematic state regulations regarding expanding units in larger municipalities in excess of 4,000. I'm sure pretty much everybody in this call is suffering through the main building code as well, varying degrees. So from that strategic plan, from those findings, from those goals, we wanted to start developing something. And that was a comprehensive plan. But instead of going deep into the full comprehensive plan, we needed to focus on three very important things: transportation, recreation, and housing, land use. So that's what we did. We convened a group of people. I think it was 9 residents, some staff. We did this in less than 9 months, actually, around 7 months. And what we came up with was something that we've already started putting into place with an amazing set of results. Flexibility, form-based code, common sense through flexibility. Let's let developers design to the form versus to density. Let them fit into the neighborhood. Let a single family home fit into the neighborhood. Let's stop being so restrictive and controlling. Simplify. Reduce the number of districts and restrictions imposed. It seems like common sense. It's about attracting your residents, commerce, and workforce. Equitable access to all housing types in all neighborhoods. At the end of the day, the goal that I personally have as mayor is to end generational poverty. We can do it, and we know the fastest, most proven way to do that is to encourage owner-occupied housing units, to satisfy the first couple basic steps of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and allow people to feel comfortable and have affordable housing or housing that's affordable. And then maximizing the use of our infrastructure that has a return on investment, which is a word that's probably spoken 3-4 times in every single meeting I'm in, whether it be planning board, city council, school committee. It's a mantra and it's a focus of Auburn. Taking action. I don't like plans that sit on a shelf and collect dust, and we all know that's what the majority of plans do. So it's about taking action. I'd like to think it's bold. It's not without controversy at all, but it starts with setting attainable goals, quantifiable, tangible goals. Auburn, 2,000 new housing units by 2025. These are market rate housing units that encourage housing affordability and attainability. To do that, we've already expanded our form-based code. That will increase the walkability market. We maximize our flexibility. Our secondary dwelling units aren't just accessory. We believe that someone can have a small home and then build an accessory dwelling unit that's larger than their initial home and then rent out their initial home. We have full flexibility. The owner dictates what and how they're doing it. Encouraging density downtown along existing infrastructure. Controlling sprawl into the outlying towns. We got to define what sprawl is, and I'll talk about that in a second. Making allowances for shared driveways, eliminating recreational standards and other impact fees, but also using our ARPA money to further housing affordability through infrastructure grants and housing advocacy. Incremental changes that have already happened. Form-based code started on the inside, working out. We are seeing development blossom everywhere. 2 units, 6 units, 3 units, single family homes, all market rate, infill. We're eliminating barriers to growth requirements. We do not have multifamily zoning anymore. That's anywhere. Parking, commercial parking requirements, we eliminated it. As soon as we did, we got an Olive Garden, we got a Target. We have lots going for sale that were just barren wastelands of asphalt. Companies know what they need for parking. Governments don't. Secondary dwellings, less prescriptive. And studies, and we did study everything, but we're using them. Environmental impact, transportation, agriculture. We have studies that were, and recreation, that we're putting to good use for the residents of Auburn. On your screen right now, you're going to see some of the results of our actions. Before, we had over on the left, over 32 different types of zones. Now we have 8. That's on the right. Here's an example of some of the graphs that we use. You can see that our proposed traditional neighborhood eliminates road frontage. It goes from 4 units per acre to up to 16. It has accommodations for 2-family, all the way to rural residential, which used to be 325 feet of frontage, down to 200 feet of frontage. And we also give allowances to share frontage with a shared driveway. That way we can increase density along existing infrastructure, existing maintained roads. Now, did we have challenges? Oh yeah, a lot of challenges. It's brutal out there. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. But we have to understand that there's a fear of change. We cannot become a victim to it. And elected officials, staff, we have to stay firm and we have to separate myth from fact. We have to share accurate and credible information. What we find ourselves doing is looking at outdated information that's provided sometimes by the state of Maine that is archaic and that is counterproductive and used as a tool against growth. This all leads into not in my backyard, neighborhood, city. We have to be honest with each other about why zoning was first put forth and how it's been corrupted over the years. Zoning should not keep neighbors from having neighbors. Zoning should keep bad but necessary things like heavy industrial manufacturing away from water sources, away from neighborhoods, and keep it to where it can be controlled and where it's not going to do harm because it's an absolute necessity. Tools for long-term solutions. Post-implementation of our new zoning. So Auburn's growing. You saw that in the slide from Mike Foley. Thanks, Mayor Foley, for sharing that. We are rapidly growing, and right now we're seeing information showing that we've gained just another 1,000 residents in just the past 9 to 12 months. So it's coming, and you can see it everywhere. But what we need to do is we need to keep motivating this. We need to keep looking, identifying our issues and solving them. So we have tools. We're focusing on market rate growth, attainable housing. We've waived permit fees for all veteran residential and veteran-owned businesses. If you're a veteran, you want to build a house, add on, build a deck, there is no permit fee. If you're an employee of the city of Auburn, education, municipal, doesn't matter. We're putting together a grant right now of $20,000 to help you build a new home or an accessory dwelling unit. We're also focusing on the missing middle. Owner-occupied units, 2, 3 unit buildings, lifting people out of generational poverty making small businesses everywhere. We're proposing a $10,000 grant per unit right now, utilizing ARPA funds. We've got set aside over $2 million in grants for in-town acquisition and revitalization. We've listed city-owned properties. We've modernized our regulations. We've eliminated over 50% of really the red tape in the city of Auburn that's frankly counterproductive. Fees that discourage construction. Financial incentives for missing middle housing, creating programs to make home ownership and rental more affordable. Energy efficiency, because housing affordability is critical. So we will match every efficiency main rebate for energy efficiency that a resident of Auburn receives. If you get $1,500 for a heat pump, we're going to cut you a check for $1,500 on top of that, helping housing become affordable. And proposing a new housing advocate, someone on staff that will sit down with John Smith, because John Smith wants to build a duplex. John Smith has no idea about building a duplex. He needs an advocate. She needs an advocate to navigate permitting, to understand what grants are available, to understand a P&L. We do it for businesses, but we don't do it for individuals in a constructive, orderly fashion. And we also have $3.6 million in lead abatement grants for older units. So not only are we building new, we're fixing old. Results, there's a lot of them. COVID accelerated everything. Over 800 new units either built, approved, or planned since 2019. Record-setting permit year in 2021. We're focusing on what buyers and residents are asking for and adjusting to promote it where an ROI exists. And we've seen significant commercial growth after parking requirements were waived. Singularly, probably one of the best things we ever did to our tax base. Still a lot more to do. This is our call to action. We all need to help each other. Okay, we all need to understand that sustainability includes the environment, but also includes affordability. We have to define and measure sprawl. Sprawl does not start or end at our municipal borders. If we have a service center, a city like Westbrook or Portland or Auburn, do we feel okay by not having people move into or out of our downtown into our more rural areas of the city? Because what they're doing is, if they want that privacy market and we don't allow them to build, they move 15 miles down the road to another town that doesn't have those rules. You could see it here. So what we're doing is, yeah, we're feeling good about Auburn, but we're not doing the climate or society a service. We're just increasing carbon. We're increasing drive time. We're actually adding multiple problems under the guise of trying to solve one. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Zoning, in my opinion, is one of the most overt racist ordinances, policies, laws, what have you, in existence in our state and our country today. It has been morphed into this. It has been used. It has been couched in language that seems comfortable and fair. But when you have income standards, when you require people to do certain things that are above the possibility of doing and have data supporting that over decades, and you don't fix it, that's criminal. We have to take a deep, hard look and have a hard conversation about what's right and what's not right. And then there's things that we need to really promote within the state. We need to look at licenses and certification that create artificial scarcity in construction and maintenance trades. We need to make sure the state does a complete hygiene overview of everything online. For example, the 2005 Comprehensive Plan Guide that's currently on the State of Maine website right now is outdated. It promotes data that's 30 years old, and that wasn't even relative to Maine, let alone New England. These things are counterproductive to the state and our municipal goals of solving housing crisis and promoting good, smart growth. And then establish collective and collaborative partnerships, sort of like with Maine State Housing Association. Great partners. I went up, I met with them, we talked, we brainstormed. There's so much knowledge in the state. If we can come together in forums like the one GP Cog is hosting, or just having meetings with the Maine State Housing Authority and others, we will accomplish goals. At the end of the day, we have to eliminate generational poverty in the state. I'm sure going to try my darndest, and we will succeed in Auburn to do so. That is the motivation. When I see someone that doesn't have a place to live and cannot climb up that socioeconomic ladder, I failed. So it's a personal thing. and thank you very much. So hopefully it's a lot of time, a lot of 4 years to push into just a couple minutes. But at this point, I'll turn it over to Vanessa.
All right, so at this time, if participants have questions, some have popped up in the chat, but it might be easier because there's been also some comments in the chat. If you would mind, please putting any questions in the Q&A. You can also raise your hand. All right, so there was a question from Doug Green. I think this was for the mayor's presentation for Westbrook. And the question probably also, crosses over to Mayor Levesque, and it touches on probably parking. So I'd like to hear a little bit from you. The question from Doug is, has there been any traffic impact analysis as you've been thinking about the development of these projects? Both of you noted that you have taken steps to reduce parking requirements in the downtown. So I wanted you to elaborate a little bit on sort of like why you're motivated to adjust parking and whether or not that, whether there was pushback because you did that and how you worked through that in your community. So if either one of you want to jump in or both, I'd sort of love to hear about that.
Yeah, I'll start. I'll take it. Okay, so parking. Yeah, we looked at traffic. We're looking at parking. We realize is we have an enormous amount of off-street parking. And really, when you're looking at parking, the city based some minimums kind of generically on, the worst case amount of possible people going to one store on Black Friday at 9 p.m., right? Something ridiculous. At the end of the day, you can't build a city like that. You need more value. So we looked at that and we took a, I don't want to say a laissez-faire, but probably approach. If Olive Garden wants to come in and take up 5 spots in order to expand their footprint, who are we to say no? It's their business. If people can't park there, they're not going to go there. So I trust in the large corporations to understand where their peaks and valleys are.
Vanessa, I can add about Westbrook. We made some of the parking changes in our downtown because we, at the same time we're seeing this growth and development, we've been investing in public transit in our community. And the Greater Portland Transit District, which I'm also a member of the board of directors of and have been for nearly most of my 20 years of service, given that Westbrook is a member owner of that organization, we've been trying to make transit more convenient in our community. And that area that I talked about, Vertical Harvest Project, that is a transit hub where 3 transit lines intersect, both the Route 4, which was the original Westbrook route, the Route 3, which is a new Westbrook route that cuts through the center of the city of Westbrook from the Riverside Street area of Portland all the way to the mall, and then the Husky line, which was all those things combined was able to help get the USM University of Southern Maine to get a transit pass to connect all their campuses and down to all the way to downtown Portland. And so we have an intersection of those 3 routes at that location, and we've been investing in that transit and making transit touch more residential areas of our community and to be able to ride transit to some of these areas. Transit's not perfect in Greater Portland. It needs to be more convenient, and the transit district is working to be able to do that over time. But I saw someone ask a question about whether any of us ride transit to work. I've ridden transit a number of times all over as a member of the board of directors. I don't do it on a regular basis. I have a small child and car seats and making sure he gets to school and all those things. It's definitely makes it more of a challenge. But when there's an opportunity to be able to use transit, I always do. My son and I take regular trips from where we live off of Spring Street in Westbrook to the main mall because transit is very convenient and efficient for that area. But to get to downtown Portland, it takes a little bit more time and is a little bit less convenient. So we're continuing to work to invest in transit to make it not so much something that people rely upon, but that people use on a more regular basis. And given the improved frequency and the transit hubs that we have, it touches all these residential areas that I was talking about.
Thank you. So sort of to expand a little bit on that, another thread in the conversation has to do with incentivizing construction. And so this upzoning, And can you describe a little bit, Mike, micro units and how they're being used in Westbrook to increase the housing stock?
Yeah, so some of those projects that I talked about are, for instance, the project that I told you was complete that had the barber shop and the floor shop, that is 6 one-bedroom units. So those are fairly small units. And I think that is something our housing market desperately needs, is an infusion of one-bedroom units. And so the development that's potentially coming on the Cumberland or the Main Street, Seabee Street area that I talked about with 120 units, 60 of the 120 units are potentially going to be micro units. And those units will be one bedroom, probably around the 500 square foot size, 500 to 600 square foot. That's where a developer can make that housing affordable for people and make it more cost effective. And then I know someone mentioned about the mayor securing the Mountain Division Trail rail line. The rail line that we talked about was a line that went off of the Mountain Division rail line to go to Sappy. And so Pan Am relinquished that. The Mountain Division rail line is right along this development area. So when the trail gets added, that goes all the way from Portland to downtown Westbrook, it's going to be right there. And somebody could hop on that trail with a bike and ride all the way to downtown Portland, and hop on that trail and go potentially another direction. So that trail is going to be there. And we've even just recently been awarded a grant to expand trail along the Mountain Division rail line all the way to the town of Wyndham from the city of Westbrook. So that's very exciting to have that trail interconnectivity from those communities. And all this development is right along this trail interconnectivity. And that's another reason why we considered the parking changes, because we have some of these trail systems that people can bike on.
Great. So Mayor Levesque, so in Auburn, I think you said that you've eliminated the density per unit requirement for downtown. Is that correct?
In our downtown, yes. I mean, we want people to build a form versus density. Density is still, obviously, it's been greatly increased throughout the rest of our city in our traditional downtown neighborhood. But we are absolutely building a transient from zero density, form-based code in residential and in the business district, frankly, all the way out.
And in result, are you seeing more interest in projects downtown because of that?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I wouldn't be surprised if we had several hundred downtown infill projects going on, or at least planned, in addition to what I already quoted before the end of the year. Yeah. Especially now that we're incentivizing these $10,000 per unit for an owner-occupied duplex or triplex. $20,000 or $30,000 from the city to help with infrastructure is huge. And it's a positive return on investment for the city and for the community at large.
Great. So in summary, we've got parking reductions, so parking space reductions, incentives, especially if you're on transit or there's walkability connectivity, no minimum lot sizes, as well as removing density as a requirement. Those are excellent. Jim, sorry, go ahead, Mayor.
No, go.
So Jim, I want to circle back to you. You mentioned something, I wrote it down. I thought it was quite amazing. Talent, place, and business. That all of these three things go together. And so I think we've heard a lot about, the things that we can be doing to get development ready. But can you talk a little bit more on why Michigan focused on talent, place, and business, and how that you see that sort of translating to the state of Maine?
Because the research is very clear, and it's been clear for about 2 decades, which is that business is seeking talent. And as the demographic cohorts shift over time, and this is before pandemic, of course, that's the case. You've heard it. You have fewer persons per household and such. So business needs talent, but simultaneously, talent in the research is more and more choosing place. They want to be in a place, whether it's in a downtown of a city, or they want to be in a corridor or a small rural community, or someplace in between. Talent is aggregating. That's what the data is showing as well. So that's why you see in some of the larger metros across the United States, larger business establishments, they're actually relocating into those larger metro areas. And I suspect a similar activity has happened or is happening in Maine to some degree as well. They're actually going to the talent bases because that's what drives their ability to actually generate whatever they're going to generate, their productivity as a business opportunity. And the third, and it's not just that only, it's that the places themselves, they need the businesses too. As you've been hearing, we want to revitalize our main streets, we want to revitalize our downtowns, we want to engage in the National Main Street Program, historic preservation. So what used to be a two-way thinking, which is business and talent goes to where the businesses are and such, that's shifted in the past 20 years, and now business is going to talent wants place needs business. And so you can think of it almost as a troika, which is moving in a systems context, which is going. And to the extent that communities like you're hearing today can actually development plan to actually accelerate that cycle, they're going to generate prosperity, social, economic, ecological, physiological.
All right, we have a question from Eamon. I'm going to call on you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Eamon Dundon here from the Portland Regional Chamber. I had a question for specifically our two municipal leaders here in Maine, the two mayors. As you both know, and I know Mayor Levesque testified at the commission, the state legislature has been studying changes potentially at the state level to force some of these changes to land use and zoning on municipalities that maybe have not been doing as much as we've heard Westbrook and Auburn have been doing. I wonder if both of you could respond to that, the recommendations from that commission. And I would just encourage you to be forceful proponents of some of these ideas. I think we're likely to see a lot of opposition from municipalities to this who don't want to play their part in the solution. And so we're going to need other municipal voices who get this, like the two of you, to step up and advocate for some of these important changes at the state level. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take first swing at this, Mike, if you don't mind, because yeah, I love this topic, Eamon. Hey, I reviewed everything. I'm still putting together all my kind of my opinions and everything with staff on this. I plan on testifying either in person, by Zoom, or written. I will say this: I am never in favor of the state forcing and eroding home rule on the municipalities, except when there's something that's absolutely flagrant and counterproductive to the betterment of the state. That's a pretty broad statement. There are some things in there I really, really like. There are a lot of things in there that I think need to be tweaked a bit. And I think getting these conversations going, as uncomfortable as they are, is going to move us all in the right direction. I would like to see a parallel path at the state, though, with rulemaking that can be done immediately in order to lower some of these barriers, to lower construction costs, to lower scarcity, to allow us to start working smartly. For example, I can't, in my city, because we have over 4,000 people, I can't have an individual add a fourth unit without sprinkling the entire building. Then it becomes cost prohibitive, so it never happens. Things like this are really important. Coupled with the legislative activity you talked about, will put us in the right direction.
Mayor Levesque, you need to get rid of that sprinkler ordinance like we did in the city of Westbrook a number of years ago, and only made it for larger units. It's definitely—
That's a state ordinance there, Mayor Foley. You might be illegal. I'm going to call the ordinance cops on you after.
No, I think it varies, but we used to have one in Westbrook that we got rid of, and it had a negative effect on development. But specifically, you know, I've looked at many of the factors of the report that Eamon is talking about, but a lot of them we do here in Westbrook. The accessory dwelling unit allowed, where residential units are, that's allowed. You know, some of the places where they talk about four units being allowed, any place residential development is allowed. I think Mayor Levesque is absolutely correct that it's tough to force municipalities in the home rule, because at the same time that Mayor Levesque and I are working through this great work, specifically in Westbrook, I'm threading the needle in a lot of these areas to avoid the NIMBYs of the world to come in. We've had some sprawl development that people don't like, and we've had this development that's happening in our core that people tend to like a little bit more, but the sprawl development is needed. Many of the developments that I outlined in my list of developments are happening in the form of sprawl. But again, in Westbrook, we respect private property rights significantly. And a lot of the zoning that these developments are taking place in is zoning that's already established. And people own that property. A lot of people have owned that property for a long time, and they save that and they invested in it in order to be able to sell it when the time was right. But definitely a lot of those areas, as part of the State Commission, I hope to advocate for. In Westbrook, aside from the State Commission, we're looking to change some of the densities, like I talked about, expand the downtown one that we had, probably the length of Main Street all the way to the Portland line, and then eventually reduce some of the density requirements in some of our more denser neighborhoods to allow people to take more dilapidated buildings that need extensive work. And if you give them the opportunity to increase their unit size, you can increase your tax base with investment, and also bring buildings up to code that aren't up to code, and make your community a safer place to live long term.
I have one last question for the three of you. I'm going off the cuff here. What is the single most program or action that you have taken in the last year that you're most proud of?
Eliminate multifamily restrictive zoning.
I'd say the expansion of this downtown housing district. As you can see, we have 4 or 5 projects. Developers are making their way through these zones and trying to find properties that are feasible. And we're creating housing right in our core, where all the infrastructure is there to support. And as I talked about, they're accessible by trails, bus systems, recreational opportunities, restaurants, grocery stores, all kinds of amazing things.
Great.
Well, from 800 miles away, what I'll tell you is that we are in the process right now in our legislature with the administration's support to change our TIF law to provide housing subsidy for attainable households.
Attainable.
Great. Great.
And Vanessa, real quick, I saw there was a question in the chat about rail. I am absolutely opposed to any light rail being built to the city of Westbrook or through the city of Westbrook. We need to expand the transit that we have. The transit that we have is not maximized. It needs to be maximized. We can go to 30 and 15-minute service all over the transit district before we invest in new infrastructure, such as rail, which requires new trains, all kinds of other things. And we could even use the rail line, if the rail line were to give it up, for bus rapid transit, which could support some of the areas that we do, and make investment in the current infrastructure we have. But Auburn, he could take the rail.
We'll take the rail because we've got the second largest population center 35 miles away and a parking scarcity in Portland, and we got plenty of land. Bring it. Let's bring it. Let's get people doing high propensity rail down to the downtown. We can solve that problem. You guys can walk to work, Mike, on your ice disc.
All right. Well, that was excellent. I want to thank you so much to our panelists for being here, and to all the participants, as well as our producers, and, in particular, the humility dealing with internet drops and mics and technology. We're coming on year 2 of COVID, and I think that Zoom, I guess it's here to stay. However, with that said, we'll be sending out links to this webinar, as well as PDFs of presentations. And again, like I said in the beginning, there's this spirit of camaraderie and peer-to-peer assistance that I think is strong in our region and beyond. And so if there's anything that you've heard here today, or you want to continue conversation, please reach out. We're happy to facilitate that. And I know that our panelists are more than willing to answer questions and keep the conversation going. So with that, we will sign off. Thank you so kindly for being here.